originally from Parkside, I believe. And without further ado, I will let her introduce herself. Our State Controller, Madam Controller BettyYee.
All right. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. And it's really a pleasure to spend a bit of time with you this evening. And thank you for the invitation to just address the coalition this evening. And thank you, Lori, for that presentation. Really learned a lot in terms of what's happening in Cow Hollow. So what I thought I'd do tonight is just speak with you about certainly the role of my office, which is probably different than controllers in other states across the nation. As your controller, I serve as the Chief Fiscal Officer for the state of California, which means that I am responsible for paying the bills, overseeing our state's finances, issuing all of our financial reports, as well as making over 49 million payments, although that increased during the COVID crisis with all of the relief payments that the state was making, including some of the Golden State stimulus payments, and now also with the inflation relief payments that the state is issuing pursuant to legislative action and the governor's enactment of those payments as part of the budget. I also have responsibility for payroll for over 280,000 state employees and employees of the California State University system. I am the independent auditor for the state of California, so just being sure that the money that we are that leaves our coffers have the authority to be dispersed according to law. And I have the responsibility of administering the unclaimed property program. And if nothing else tonight, just know that if you have any unclaimed property that my office is holding, just visit claimit.ca.gov. That's claimit.ca.gov. It's a public database of all the properties that we are holding, and some of it may belong to any one of you. So unlike perhaps other controllers across the nation, I also have policy reach. I serve on over 70 boards and commissions with jurisdiction over public pensions, tax policy, victims compensation, financing authorities for a whole myriad of issues, including affordable housing, as well as many of our environmental boards, the State Lands Commission, which I chair in alternate years. I am the current chair of the State Lands Commission, which means that I also serve on the Ocean Protection Council and the California Coastal Commission as well. Much of what I do is through the lens of the economy. So we keep very close tabs to what is happening with the economy. And obviously top of mind right now is inflation and how the Fed has been responding to that with the rising interest rates. And we have seen price changes, mostly being driven by the increase in food prices, housing prices, and healthcare costs, and pretty soon probably the price of energy as well. It is something that we are monitoring closely because this also has implications for how employers in the state are responding to inflation, certainly as consumers, the increased pressure that they're under, which is why my office of the Franchise Tax Board are issuing about 20 million inflation relief payments, or what is known as middle income tax refunds that are starting to be issued either as direct deposit payments or in the form of debit cards. So what I wanted to talk about tonight is really, I think, what is of interest to all of you, and that is housing. This is something that has been plaguing the state. We are in a housing crisis, certainly not building enough to the demand that we need for housing. It is probably one of the greatest measures of the growing inequality in California as well. We have more and more, we're hearing stories about how Californians are leaving because of the high cost of living, and much of it driven by the cost of housing. Although at this point with the economy, we are seeing some slowing with respect to the price of housing in different parts of the state. Our population grew by just 6.1% during the last decade, which is slower than the national average of about 7.4%. So much of this is it's a combination of the lower levels of of birth rates, as well as some who are leaving the state of California. In fact, California recently lost a congressional seat for the first time because of our population loss. So this affordability driven migration does threaten California. We realize that. It is also the possibility of looking at hemorrhaging a lot of human capital and talent to other states. And we know, though, that even as prices are starting to moderate a bit, the median household income is about 14% higher in California than the national average, but home ownership costs are about 215% of the national average. And so just quite a bit of disparity. And of course, here in the Bay Area, our home costs are 3.5 times the national average. So I have a seat on 2 of the boards that deal with affordable housing, the Tax Credit Allocation Committee, as well as the California Debt Limit Allocation Committee. Both of these do look to provide certainly tax credits as incentives for developers to build affordable housing, and as well as the Debt Limit Allocation Committee, where the state does have a determined by federal law a debt a ceiling for tax exempt bonds that can be used for public benefit purposes, including affordable housing and other public amenities. And so even combined with those 2 areas combined, really have not been able to meet the need that we have for the number of units that need to be built in California to meet the demand. What I have been advocating, frankly, at the state level is to have all of our housing finance programs at the state level be consolidated so that we can look at the state doing its part to reduce the cost of housing in terms of the time associated with approvals for these various financing programs. There are about 6 different programs that are housed in across different agencies in California, and I have been proposing over the last couple of years a bill to consolidate all of those so that we have a single allocation committee that can provide approvals for these projects so that we can see the entirety of the financing of a project and be able to approve them, knowing that we can get hopefully up to a 1.5 almost 2 years, reduced in terms of when we can break ground on these projects. This has been met with opposition by some of our labor groups, as well as just many of my colleagues who believe that bills like this are a power grab. And my purpose of trying to just put the bill through is to reduce the time for approvals. The time value of money in housing is quite stark. And so we hope to have authors in the legislature who will pursue this proposal again in the future. So as I think about housing, it is the one area where a lot of our bond rating agencies have identified as the single most important factor that will continue to be a drag on any kind of economic recovery if we don't make any more progress, further progress with respect to housing affordability. And of course, housing affordability has been really affecting all different Californians, from our students at our public universities to those who are working adults who just aren't able to make their rent every month, working, perhaps even living out of their cars. These are all very real things that are happening throughout the state of California. And part of what I have been noticing in my capacity on these different boards on which I sit, particularly the State Lands Commission, with the growing homelessness crisis in California, we have been seeing many more local jurisdictions looking at getting approval from the State Lands Commission for these navigation centers. We know there's one at the Embarcadero. There was one recently approved earlier this year at Candlestick Point at a parking lot where we could have a safe parking lot shelter for people who spend the night in their cars. But these are the kinds of things that do cross the other commissions on which I serve. You know, I just wanted to just talk a little bit about these environmental boards, because I think this has been of interest to all of us, particularly in San Francisco and being a coastal city and certainly a city by the bay. As I said, I do have a seat on the 3 environmental entities: State Lands Commission, Coastal Commission, and the Ocean Protection Council. And just a quick update and to give you a flavor of what we have been working on at the State Lands Commission. At our recent meeting in August, we authorized the final distribution of port stimulus funding that to address the lost revenue due to the pandemic. And this was a $250 million allocation from the American Rescue Plan funds from the federal government that included some language that allowed some of that money to be directed to our ports. This included 2.2 million for the Port of San Francisco, but all told, with the earlier allocations, the Port of San Francisco received 117 million of the 250 million over 3 rounds of funding that came from the federal government. The Port of Oakland received about $14 million through the stimulus program, and Governor Newsom signed a bill which requires also the State Lands Commission to look at have a forward-looking orientation with respect to looking at how we deal with the remaining offshore oil operations in state waters. And this is something that is within the jurisdiction of the State Lands Commission. Many of these oil operations are permitted by the state. And we did shutter the last state oil platform in the Santa Barbara Channel and decommissioning those wells and plugging them as we speak. But other facilities, and really these are oil companies that do business in federal waters, but because of the transmission of oil and pipelines, they do come through state waters. And the law as it reads today, we can't shut these entities down as long as they are still producing oil. They have a right to produce, but we can at least begin to look at what it would mean if we have them, if we set up conditions where they voluntarily terminate their remaining oil operations, and just what the fiscal impact and financial impact would be. So that study will be underway starting next year by the State Lands Commission with the help of an outside contractor. The Ocean Protection Council in June, the council authorized about 4.2 million for the Bay Conservation and Development Commission, known as BCDC, to all of us, to support coastal resilience efforts in the San Francisco Bay. Approximately 2.1 million will go towards coordinating regional sea level rise mitigation efforts, and the other 2.1 million will fund wetland restoration projects in the San Francisco Bay. So this is welcome funding, and hopefully will accelerate certainly the work of the BCDC as it relates to how we are able to protect communities with the eventuality of sea level rise. These resources are part of a larger effort to address sea level rise in the Bay, which includes $3 million from the State Coastal Conservancy as well. In addition, we have about $75 million that's been appropriated to the Ocean Protection Council in this current budget year to further expand the Bay Adapt Joint Platform. And this is the BCDC-led effort, which aims to protect San Francisco Bay's natural and built environment from rising sea levels. And so that work is going to include all the jurisdictions that really outline the periphery of the Bay, and really looking to see whether we can have this joint effort be a model for how other entities in California can start to deal with sea level rise as well. The council recently authorized about 3.6 million for the Tribal Marine Stewards Network, and this is to fund coastal monitoring and tribal engagement work over the next 3 years. 5 tribes are participating in this network, including the Amamusan tribal band known as the Ohlone of the North Monterey Bay area, and the Cassia Band of Pomo Indians in Sonoma County. And tribal engagement has been a very big focus of all of the environmental entities in California. And this is a model for the state to hopefully uplift and incorporate our the traditional knowledge in statewide policy while compensating tribal members for their contributions. And so we welcome that engagement, as these are inhabitants of the lands that we share today who have quite a bit of knowledge about how to work with these lands on a natural basis. The California Coastal Commission, I'm not able to get into much detail or discuss much of the issues, but I did want to highlight and just give notice about what we are dealing with. And that is after the San Francisco Bay is under the regulatory authority of the BCDC, but the Coastal Commission, rather than the Coastal Commission, that there is kind of a small sliver of land that runs along the Pacific Ocean in San Francisco from Lake Merced to the shoreline, up to the shoreline to Ocean Beach, kind of my old neighborhood, and including the western portion of Golden Gate Park. And so that is actually within the Coastal Commission jurisdiction. At the November meeting that is coming up, actually starting this week, the Commission will consider the National Park Service Plan to establish restrictions for commercial air tours over the Golden Gate National Recreation Area, Muir Woods, the San Francisco Maritime National Historic Park, and Point Reyes National Seashore. And an application, also on the agenda is an application for a desalination plant in Monterey County. So this just gives you a flavor of the types of things that I have the great privilege of being engaged in. And I know that some of you have had some questions that you've posed to me, and I'm happy to just engage in those in this next segment. So I think I'll over back to you.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Controller. Before we start questions and answers from our audience, a couple of things. Number one, keep in mind that Betty is here to talk about her role as state commissioner, not her role in the Democratic Committee or anything else that she's a member of. Number two, if you have a question, please be succinct. Make a statement if you have to ask your question, but keep your question gauged toward getting information about her role. And number three, of course, be respectful, no dear sir, you cur kind of comments, please. Before we start questions from the audience, there are three pre-selected questions that I have been asked to ask. You spoke a minute ago about desalinization. You have a role on the State Lands Commission. Would the State Lands Commission be one of the leads for implementing offshore desalinization? That's the first pre-submitted question.
Sure, and thank you for the question. So the State Lands Commission jurisdiction is, we have jurisdiction over the public trust doctrine in coastal waters. So we are one of the entities that implement things like offshore wind energy. And so in terms of an offshore desalination plant, we would be involved if it is, if any of the siting of the facility is on state waters, and that state waters is basically 3 miles out to where the federal water line starts. So if the project were proposed in state waters, then the State Lands Commission would likely be the lead leasing agency for offshore desal projects. If the location was not within a grant. And what that means is that in our California statutes, there are specific grants of lands to a specific local jurisdiction. So for example, the Berkeley Marina, that is a specifically statutorily granted land to the city of Berkeley. So we would not have jurisdiction at the State Lands Commission for decisions that are made with respect to those lands. But to the extent that the State Lands Commission would be the lead agency, we'd be the lead agency under CEQA. And the first step to implement a desal project would be to submit an application to the State Lands Commission, and then we would determine its completeness for then to be approved by the commission itself.
Okay, great, thank you. Second pre-selected question. The Ocean Protection Council will work with the marine sanctuary boards off the coast of California. Could this include the designation of a new Golden Gate National Marine Sanctuary in the waters off of Ocean Beach?
The short answer to that is yes, it could. This area has not been formally designated yet, but or formally nominated yet for sanctuary purposes, but discussions are ongoing to potentially consider it either for inclusion in the Greater Farallones National Marine Sanctuary, or as a new and separate Golden Gate National Marine Sanctuary. So still unclear about which option will be pursued. Staff at the sanctuary will be embarking on their management plan review in 2023. And the Sanctuary Advisory Council will be working through any recommended regulatory changes needed to advance those priorities. So there'll be opportunities for the public to make comment and to on the draft management plan revision during the NOAA review phase. So the phase that is under the jurisdiction of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So it is a fairly lengthy process, but if the proposed news designation is within the open coastal waters, then and not in the bay, then the Coastal Commission's Federal Consistency Review Authority would be triggered and would be providing additional opportunities for public comment. If the any portion of it is within the San Francisco Bay, then it would be the BCDC would also carry out a federal consistency review as well. So it really just depends on what the designation looks like. That would then tell us which of the bodies would have the responsibility for the federal consistency review. The State Lands Commission has not made any formal recommendation on this topic, but it may be greatly beneficial to incorporate all of the beach complexes from the Mendocino-Sonoma County border to the Santa Cruz-Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuaries border. We look at this really kind of statewide from the State Lands Commission perspective. The continuity of the area, I think, would benefit the sanctuary as it would bring greater funding sources for restoration through NOAA. It also would give NOAA and some of the other entities a greater presence for restoration and outreach in these areas as well. So, and then the 30 by 30 initiative specifically, one of the approaches is to conserve 30% of coastal waters, and that would strengthen protections within sanctuaries that will increase biodiversity. So I would say that Ocean Protection Council, all of these entities of which I am a part of, we are working to determine next steps, certainly using the Greater Farallones as a model for other sanctuaries.
Great, thank you. Last pre-selected question. The Coastal Commission, based on Coastal Commission regs, what would be an appropriate time frame to permit an ocean water pumping station as part of the implementation of San Francisco's dedicated emergency firefighting water system in the Parkside neighborhood?
Well, this one's personal to me. I know about this one. Without more specific information or an application, I think it's pretty speculative on my part in terms of being able to provide a timeline. But if the proposed pump station is sited oceanside and drawing water from the Pacific Ocean, it would require a permit from the Coastal Commission. If it were proposed bayside, the permit would likely be issued from the BCDC. So again, really depending on where this is being proposed. If oceanside, the Coastal Commission is required to take a permit before the commission within 180 days of a complete application. And this is important because getting an application to complete status is usually what is the most time-consuming part of the process. So the commission works very closely with the applicant to be sure that they can get an application to complete status. And then once that is determined, the Coastal Commission has 180 days to hear and decide the matter. So I would recommend reaching out to the Coastal Commission staff with more information regarding the location and the proposed project. And if you'd like, you can reach out to my staff at sco.ca.gov. We'd be happy to just get you in touch with the right people to take a look at this.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Before we go on, one quick note for everybody that when it comes time for questions, CSFN members will get first nod, and then guests will get second nods. Glenn, we will go to you first, and then to Maria Eliza, and then to George.
Thank you very much, Charles. I wanted to ask Madam Controller a question regarding the desire to have increased density, increased building in San Francisco. And I wanted to bring to her attention that there is 6% of the population has left San Francisco. And
Yes.
many people feel that it's the because of the birthplace of remote work. Castle, which is a security service that monitors the attendance at businesses in San Francisco, noted 40% absentee. All that being said, could we be free of your requirement to have more building in San Francisco and allow our planning department to make their own decisions, since we are completely different than any other city in the nation, including New York?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. At this point, under state law, all of the regions of California are responsible for submitting their housing goals, just based on the population and these, regional housing needs allocation then drives the financing in terms of where state financing can go, but also in partnership with local government financing as well. That would take a statutory change to be exempt from that. And so that would obviously need to happen. I think there has been a lot of conversation about just how unrealistic some of these, goals have been. So I know this will become an ongoing conversation with the legislature. The specific changes, I think, will probably differ from region to region, but this is one that I know the legislature will be putting more attention to because it would require a statutory change.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Maria Eliza.
Hi, I just wanted to first of all let you know that you were very popular. We've had more guests here tonight to hear from you than we generally have. So
I'll consider that a great welcoming home. Thank you.
So I have a question regarding the RENA audit that was just done.
Mhm.
We understand the methodology of the RENA was audited. And I'm just curious as to whether your office was involved or there was some other office involved.
It was not our office. I believe that audit was done by the state auditor. So let me just give you a clarification. So the audits that my office does are internal control audits. These are internal financial control audits to determine whether state agencies and local agencies have strong internal financial controls, which means that there are checks and balances, that they are following the authority to spend their money, and that they are accounting for it in terms of financial reports. The RENA audit was actually a performance audit to look at whether the program is actually established as it's currently established is going to meet its goals. So we were not involved with that. The Department of Housing and Community Development was involved, and I believe it was the Bureau of State Audits, but I'm going to have to look again. Don't recall, but our office was not involved.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Thank
thank you. Okay, George.
Hi, Madam Controller.
Hello.
George Wooding. My question is very similar to Glenn's, but in more scope.
Mhm.
With so many people leaving just California, the state, not specifically San Francisco,
Yes.
how do you forecast California's future development and growth?
No, great question. So the forecast is based on estimates of population. So the Department of Finance, the California Department of Finance, does provide regular demographic updates. And I would say that the outmigration of Californians has not been to a level of where those numbers likely will change on a relative basis, at least not in the near term. But obviously, we're watching those trends. From my perspective, I'm watching the trends with respect to our revenues and what is happening with workers leaving California and companies leaving California. So that's kind of where I am putting my focus. But from a RENA perspective, a lot of this is done by our regions in California, and so even as we've had this outmigration, we still have people coming into the state, but it's, we're just going to continue to monitor it. But I think on a relative basis, it really hasn't changed the formula as much.
Okay, thank you very much for your time. We have time for one more question. This can be from either a CSFN member or from one of our guests. Seeing no hands being raised, Madam Controller, thank you very much for coming tonight. You've been very informative, and I wish you well.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to see all of you. Take care.